Mysterious. Hey everybody, welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. Thanks for coming on in. I got a couple more Bigfoot sightings to talk about today. Hope everybody's feeling well. Our family's coming down with a little cold. Hope it's not the Rona. I'm tired of that. Well, let me know where y'all are listening from down in the comments. I always love that. Let's jump right into today's Bigfoot encounters. This first one comes to us from Daniel of North Carolina. The hollow that I was fishing on the day that I had my sighting of Bigfoot was located just a few miles from my house. I'd fished there on many occasions, and this was just another one of those days. A creek ran through this deep hollow, which required a downhill walk of some 300 or 400 feet to access. The banks on either side of the creek were flanked by what was about a 25-degree incline from the bottom to the top of the hollow, which remained at about that same grade throughout. I say this because coming down to the creek was one thing and climbing out was quite another. The tree cover on either side was dense, but the trees themselves were very thin. The underbrush was sporadic and reasonably close to the ground, being at most 6 feet tall and very patchy. I only mention this visibility as you look around. It was not great, but it wasn't impossible to see through either. Depending on where you're standing, there were areas where one could see right to the top of the hollow virtually unobstructed, while in other places you couldn't see 50 feet. Both sides of the hollow as well as the creek were well lit as the bright sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating everything around me. I was knee-deep in the creek, working my streamer around a massive boulder, and I'd been in this same spot for almost an hour. There was absolutely nobody else around, and to be truthful, in all the years I had been coming here, I'd never seen another soul. It was then that I heard some leaves rustling behind me and up the side of the hollow. When I looked, a large buck was running, not walking, down the side of the hollow, keeping in mind that this was several hundred feet down from the top to get where I was standing. The buck, having reached the bottom, jumped over the creek and commenced to run back up the other side to get out of the hollow. Now, this was very unusual behavior for a deer. Generally, when they run, it's in short bursts, which told me that this buck was terrified of whatever had been spooking it. From the moment I saw it, I watched it come down one side until it had completely made it up the other, and it was gone from my view. I kept looking up the side it had descended, expecting to see something in pursuit, but I seen nothing. So I refocused my attention on the creek. It was about a minute or so later, as I kept finding myself looking over my shoulder, that I noticed a large dark figure coming down into the hollow, some maybe 200 feet away from me. It took me all of about 10 seconds to realize I was looking at a Bigfoot. I slowly negotiated my way into a position where I was hidden behind the boulder in the creek. I stayed there virtually unmoving as I watched the Bigfoot. It came right down to the creek and knelt down, cupping its hands several times to drink some water. Afterwards, it stood up and looked right in my direction for several seconds. Whether it saw me or not, I don't know. But that's when I realized that although I was well concealed, my yellow fishing pole was sticking up in the air like an antenna. The creature turned and walked south of me following the creek for about 50 yards, occasionally stopping and reaching down to flip a rock over. After about 15 minutes or so, which felt like an eternity, having not looked back in my direction so much as one time, the Bigfoot turned and walked back up the side of the hollow from where he'd come from. When standing in the sunlight, he was dark, like a chocolate brown color. And I would have to say he was at least 8 feet tall, if not more. This thing was massive and very sturdily built. When he began to ascend back up the hill, he did so with seemingly great ease, taking what appeared to be 8 to 10 foot strides uphill, reaching the 300-foot tall top in maybe a little over a minute's time. It was absolutely amazing to experience, but it might be a minute before I go back in that area to do any fishing. Well, what do y'all think? Was this Bigfoot actually oblivious to this guy being there, or did this guy just get lucky and the Bigfoot didn't want anything to do with him? Let's jump into our next one. This one comes to us from Maryanne out of Southern California. In 2015, my girlfriends and I had seen a movie. It was a screen version of the book, A Walk in the Woods. And we were so enamored with what we'd seen that the three of us decided to go for a walk ourselves. It was in late June of 2016 that, after much planning, Trish, Janice, and I found ourselves in the state of Washington, where we were about to commence on a hike on a section of the Pacific Crest Trail in North Cascades National Park. The forest in there was dense and lush, with trees and branches and brush of all shapes and sizes hanging over the path. The greenery was in view continually, everywhere that you looked. There were huge downed trees at every twisting turn that the trail took. At many points during the walk, we were following a creek which meandered throughout the forest. The three of us were walking at a fairly good clip, with Trisha having taken the lead. Suddenly, Trisha came to a stop and turned towards us with her finger to her mouth, indicating for us to be quiet. She then waved to us as if to say, "Come to where I am, but slowly." Janice and I closed the gap between ourselves and her to the point where all of us were now together, crouching down behind a group of low bushes. Trisha kept holding her finger to her mouth while mouthing the words, "Watch over there." Over there, where she was pointing, was a bend in the creek, which had 3 logs laying across it, having been placed there as some kind of makeshift bridge in order to cross the creek. There were many such bridges along the trail at different points. Initially, we didn't see anything, but we all kept still and very quiet, waiting and watching for something to happen. When, without warning, something did happen. A large Sasquatch stepped out of the brush and across the creek in one singular step. At the point where it had stepped across, the creek was at least 8 or 9 feet wide. As it stepped across, it then turned around, crouching down by the edge of the creek, and started to pick at something in the water as though it was looking for food or something. Why it didn't just walk across is anyone's guess. Perhaps it didn't like the cold water, and the water in the creek was very cold indeed. As with all things in life, timing is everything. And just as we set eyes on this monster, Janice must have felt something crawling on her neck. With one knee-jerk swat of her hand to get the bug off her, the Sasquatch stood to its feet with its eyes fixed directly on us. It was only maybe 100 feet away from us. I could see its eyes, which were as dark as 2 lumps of coal, staring us down. The Sasquatch didn't move so much as an inch, and neither did we. The creature then started to emit a low kind of grumbling growl, very much like a dog does when she's getting ready to bark, having sensed or seen something in the woods behind my house. The growl was deep, resonant, continuous, and I might add, very frightening to us all. I suddenly felt that we were in imminent danger, and that this growl was a warning before the attack. No sooner had that thought entered my mind than the Bigfoot took 3 fast leaps in our direction, splashing and stomping its way through the creek, heading directly towards us. Stomping suddenly and flexing its upper body, it began to twist its head around in the air and letting out a whining type of growl, which words cannot describe. It then grimaced, looking directly at us, and emitted a loud snort, like that of a horse. Much to the girl's credit, none of us had so much as a flinch while all of this took place. I guess it was just a show of dominancy. For a moment later, the Sasquatch took one step out of the creek and vanished into the woods. We all stood quietly to our feet, looking intently into the woods where it had gone, but we saw nothing. Gradually, we started to backtrack out of the trail, wanting nothing further to do with this monster. This creature was gigantic in every sense of the word. And what it looks like is something entirely unto itself. This was in no way, shape, or form any type of gorilla or human offshoot of any kind. The 3 of us agreed that it was more likely than not 10 feet tall and all of 1,000 pounds or more. At one point during the sighting, its one palm was facing towards me, and the palm of its hand alone, excluding the fingers, was the size of a catcher's mitt. The fingers that extended from it were perhaps 8 to 10 inches in length. It seemed to me at the time, when everything was taking place, that we were all spellbound, for lack of a better term, which would generally not be the case under such circumstances, particularly as it concerns Janice. She would jump and scream if a raccoon walked into her yard, and yet during this encounter, she remained silent, as did all of us. To give you a little bit more of a description of this creature, its fur was very dark and appeared to be a mix of black and brown, which was very hard to distinguish. There was no neck visible whatsoever. When the head turned, the body followed, as though its head was fixed within its body. The muscles of its upper back formed an arch behind the head, and it didn't appear to have so much as an ounce of fat on its body. As far away as we were from it, we could still smell a strong and foul odor while it was present, which reminded me of raw sewage or something of the like. Having left the creek, we couldn't hear anything of it walking away, which really was meaningless. In that forest, the floor was rather damp and soft wherever we were. Wow, that one could have ended badly. What do y'all think of that? I bet they were all scurrying around for a change of pants when they got back to the car. If any of y'all had a Bigfoot encounter, you know I love to hear about it. Shoot me an email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. And if you like my content, hit that bell, because many people aren't getting notified when I put these videos up. Drop me a subscribe, hit that like button, do all the fun YouTube, all that stuff. And I will see y'all in the next one. Appreciate y'all.